ANEC Sports presents a Frick Media Productions, created by the founder and editor at the ANEC Network, Sam Frick. This is the opening drive. Welcome to episode 8 of the opening drive. My name is Sam Frick. I'm the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, aka ANEC Sports. We cover schools across Northeast Indiana, Elkhart County, and for the good folks down in Marion, Indiana. Here we go, episode 8. And for this episode, we are previewing the sectional championship games across the ANEC area. We have a handful of games to discuss here with very little time to waste, as we are here to preview the sectional championship games for football, which also includes our ANEC games of the week. First of which is obviously the East Noble and Bishop Winter matchup in 4A Sectional 19. We'll talk about that game in a matter of moments. The other one will be coming in 3A Sectional 26 when the Angola Hornets host the Garrett Railroaders in the I-69 rivalry between these two longtime rivals in the Northeast Corner Conference. So, in case you haven't noticed, Angola upset West Noble. Garrett beat Lakeland once again for, I believe it's the 6th consecutive meeting, I should say, whatever that is. It's 5 or 6 straight meetings. But either way, Garrett has kind of owned the Lakeland Lakers. They did it again. We'll talk about that in a matter of moments. But first of which, we just want to say that we're near the end of the fall season. So once we get through mostly to the end of the football season, I'll start getting the rest of the all ANEC postseason awards for the other sports such as cross country and volleyball, soccer. We're just getting close to the end of this fall season as a whole, and really we're getting into the winter season. Girls basketball is well underway for the 2025-26 season, and obviously we're going to talk a little bit more about the girls basketball scene throughout the course of these first few weeks of the season, get things introduced, get things ready to go for that. But without further ado, we need to get going on previewing our upcoming slate of football games here, and so let's not waste any more time, and let's go ahead and preview those matchups. And we begin with let's go ahead and begin first with actually Class 1A. And we're going to start with 1A Sectional 44, which is where South Adams is at right now. They are the host of this sectional championship game. The Starfires come in 8-3. And so far in this postseason, they're averaging over 45 points per game. They're giving up a little over 20 points per game through the first 2 weeks of postseason play. Obviously, they have not lost since September 26th when they fell 35-7 at the hands of Adams Central. And if you take away the Adams Central and Marion local games, the Bluffton game was literally one drive away from really being a different outcome in that game against the Bluffton Tigers. And then beyond that point, they've basically steamrolled everybody in their season so far. And they're, South Adams should be looked at as one of the top teams in 1A for a good reason. They bring back a lot of great players coming into the season, led by Titus Lehman and Wes Somerset of the Starfires, and just a whole slew of talented receivers on that South Adams squad under Grant Moser, the longtime head football coach of the South Adams Starfires. 45-28 win against Madison Grant, that was seen as potentially the hardest path for South Adams in this postseason. And then obviously they made sure not to let try to avenge the loss from last year become a factor in the storyline. They pull away from Tri pretty easily at Tri last week. And you looked at South Adams up to this point. Obviously, Titus is doing what Titus does best. He has got a great arm. He's very accurate quarterback. He's a big difference maker in that passing game for the Starfires. And then, even got a guy in the backfield like Will Patterson. He ran for 103 yards on 9 carries against the Argyles of Madison Grants in that 17-point win. Obviously, you got Wes Somerset and Derek McCain, right? And you got Jack Swanner. Once again, Patterson is sometimes involved in the passing game as well. You got a really good offensive line that's experienced. They return a lot of guys from last year. You could see a very seasoned, very cohesive offensive line that's making life so much easier for everybody on that South Adams steel position and really just causing a lot of issues for opposing defenses. You look at, in the Madison Grant game, you got Manny Juarez, who had an interception, a fumble recovery against Madison Grant, quietly overlooked in that win over the Argyles as well. Somerset also had a sack here as well. Look at a sophomore from the South Adams Starfires, and Zayden Balmer. He caused a fumble that set up one of the 2 fumble recoveries for the South Adams Starfires. Juarez also keying on special teams as well for the South Adams Starfires. And he got the win against Tri last week. 49-14 win for South Adams. Again, Lehman doing what Lehman does best. 340 yards passing, 66% completion, 4 TD passes. And then you had a massive game from guys like Derek McCain and West Somerset. McCain, 104 yards, 9 catches, a touchdown. Somerset, big game all around, 99 yards receiving on 6 catches, 2 touchdowns. You also had, let's see here, on defense, Somerset 9 tackles, 1 TFL. Somerset with 1 pick and also a caused fumble along the way. And that interception went for an 82-yard return for a pick 6. So amazing game all around for West Somerset as South Adams looks to take on the Hagerstown Tigers and looking to once again repeat as sectional champions. And you look at Hagerstown, 5-6 on the season are the Hagerstown Tigers representing the Tri-Eastern Conference. They have picked up their best football at the right time. They entered the postseason with a 4-game losing streak. They lost a couple blowouts along the way, and, they drew Union City in the first round. Pretty favorable matchup for Hagerstown, and they won that one at home against Union City, a team they beat by 41 in the regular season. And then you had the matchup against Monroe Central on the road, and Monroe Central came into the tournament winning 4 games. They beat Cambridge City Lincoln in the first round, so you had an even matchup there in the second round. So Hagerstown's been able to take advantage of games that are seen as winnable games for Hagerstown. And their last win against Monroe Central, Hagerstown, their quarterback is a sophomore, Arlen Berger, 10 of 23 passing for 136 yards, 2 TDs, no picks, no less. Not the best quarterback out there, but did his job well against Monroe Central. They got a running back that's only a freshman in Lincoln Small. He had a nice game against Monroe Central, 20 carries for 90 yards and a touchdown for him. Small also 2 catches, 14 yards. And then they have a wide receiver as a senior in Isaac Schmitz, 4 catches for 87 yards and a pair of touchdowns for him. And, with Hagerstown, they have their areas they do well, and there's areas they don't do great. They're not the best team defensively per se, but they have looked better of late. And obviously when they hold teams below 25 some points, we're talking about a team that hasn't lost yet. They're 5-0 when they hold teams below 25 points. So that's pretty big for Hagerstown. If they can hold South Adams to around, the problem is for Hagerstown is they're going to have a hard time holding South Adams to below 25 points because South Adams is just so good at what they do in that air raid spread offense attack, so to speak, that West Coast offense of South Adams. And I think they're going to have a hard time holding them to below 25 points. But if they can hold them maybe below 30 points per se, Hagerstown may have a chance in this game. But obviously they're going to have a huge challenge defensively against a really athletic and talented South Adams squad. Other things to mention with Hagerstown, Nick Tinkle had 8 tackles, 2 TFLs. Again, aforementioned Schmitz with 8 tackles. Got a sophomore in Fletcher Callahan with 6 tackles, 1 TFL, 9 tackles for Gus Duller, the sophomore wide receiver linebacker. And then leading the way in tackles is another Schmitz, a junior Cale Schmitz. He had 13 tackles, 1 TFL. And, you look at this team, again, pretty solid team, pretty solid 1A program. But I would say when you look at this matchup on paper, South Adams should be prohibitive favorites to win this game and to advance to regionals next week, which I think South Adams are going to be an intriguing team to watch in the 1A state tournament. And just, for clarity, if South Adams does win that game in 1A, they would either go to Fremont or go to North Miami, which is going to be a good transition point to talking about 1A sectional 43, which is going to be at North Miami. By the way, just a heads up here, Jared McLaughlin of Fremont, I believe he's only a sophomore, named ANEC Football Performer of the Week. And so we will have that posted as soon as I'm done recording this episode here. But Fremont, nice season for them. Their best season since 2001 for the Fremont Eagles. Nice story for them. They've been overlooked a little bit this year, but Fremont's had a nice little story with Carmine Moreno coming in as a senior this year. You got some younger guys coming in making a difference, led by Jared Laughlin of the Fremont Eagles. They've won their last 4. It's one of the longest winning streaks they've had in a while as well for Fremont. They're averaging 35.6 points per game, which is a testament to Fremont's experienced offensive line and some key guys coming back, and then some guys in the underclass stepping up as well for the Fremont Eagles. 8-3 record are Fremont Eagles. They've also only given up 19 points per game, which is very testament. They have not given up more than 19 points in a game since October 3rd when they gave up 42 against Eastside. Now, Fremont did struggle a little bit in the small school division. I mean, that is to be expected when you're playing Churubusco and you're playing Eastside in that particular division. You're going to have some struggles there. I think when you look at Fremont, for the most part, they've done a nice job when it comes to everything else across the board. Obviously, they took care of business against Blackhawk Christian, which they did as well in week 1 when they beat them 42-6. They didn't quite shut them out, but still. And then you have the win against Blackhawk in the postseason, 48-10. And that was led by, once again, it's a junior quarterback in Jarrett Laughlin. I thought he was a sophomore. He's actually just only a junior. 214 yards rushing, 15 carries, 2 touchdowns. And then you had your senior Carmine Moreno, 17 carries for 103 yards. And he also found himself in the end zone as well for him. Let's see here. Some other things to note in that Blackhawk Christian game, which obviously they were heavily favored going into that game. Let's see here. Trace Hanshu, who's a senior, 1 catch for 44 yards. That was a touchdown catch. Moreno also had a touchdown catch. So he had 2 rushing TDs and a touchdown catch for Moreno. And then on defense, particularly up front, you got a senior in Hayden McNeely with 11 tackles, a junior in Ryland Morton with 13 tackles for him. And then you had 3 interceptions on defense with Morton, Laughlin, and McNeely all each having 1. Laughlin also with 2 pass deflections there. And so Fremont, pretty balanced team for a 1A school. And again, Fremont, nice team there. Now, the Triton game last week, I said it was kind of an upset win for Fremont. And it's not to disrespect Fremont or to discredit Fremont as a team, but Triton came into this game one of the favorites to win the sectional. And Triton's a pretty tested team. They played some good teams. They played LaVille and Bremen. They played North Judson, who's a state powerhouse in 1A. North Miami. They beat North Miami the regular season. They were seen as maybe a slight favorite to win that sectional. So Triton's a solid team. And so for Fremont to come and make a comeback win against Triton 28-19 is critical. It was critical in that game and critical for Fremont to come away and play 4 quarters of Fremont Eagles football to win that game. Laughlin, again, 8-15 passing for 76 yards, 28 carries for 244 yards, 4 rushing TDs. What a game for the junior quarterback, Jarrett Laughlin. I swear, this podcast is going to make Jarrett Laughlin get his 15 minutes of fame. That's just how great of a postseason it's been for Jarrett Laughlin, for him. And I think that's going to be critical going into the matchup against North Miami there. Let's see, Hanshu, 33 yards on 4 catches. Receiving wise, he didn't have 33 catches. I wish they did, but that's not the case. It's only 8 catches for 76 yards as a team, passing wise. So let's make that very clear there. Defensively, McNeely with 11 tackles. You got a sophomore, Colton Armstrong with 13 hard-earned tackles for him, 1 TFL. You got 2 TFLs from Carmine Moreno, although he was very limited in that game against Triton, and then Morton with the pick for the Fremont Eagles. So now you get this matchup with North Miami, the defending sectional champions, the North Miami Warriors, historically one of the better 1A programs in Northern Indiana. They've had their ups and downs, but North Miami's recently become a pretty good team, averaging 38.5 points per game. Are the North Miami Warriors, just giving up 17 points per game. Now, they did give up 30 points against Southwood last week. Southwood's a decent team. They're a lot better than last year, although the record doesn't indicate that. But North Miami is an explosive team. They're going to get their fair share of offense, and a lot of it comes from their run game. They are a team that primarily pounds the rock when it comes to North Miami. Their lead in terms of rushing touchdowns is a quarterback in Hartley Hoover. And he kind of does what Hartley Hoover does best as a mobile quarterback at North Miami. They only throw 48 attempts on the season. 40 coming from Hoover. 20 of 40 for 214 yards, 50% completion, just 1 passing TD, and 3 interceptions. The QBR 43.1. They don't throw the ball much at all. They don't throw much. And when they do, it can lead to some interesting results, to put it lightly. They rely heavily on their run attack. They got 2 running backs they go to, and they pound the rock at nauseum. And those 2, let's start off with number 4, their senior, Ryan Meredith. Meredith is a guy that you probably have heard of in baseball, right? Ryan Meredith is a baseball player as well for the North Miami Warriors, as well as Lake Musal. Musal is a senior fullback and middle linebacker. So they have a fullback, and then they kind of have a halfback on there as well. So they rely on a 2 running back, 2 back rotation, and then they have Hoover coming in as an additional 3rd type of running back, I guess. More of a mobile quarterback than anything. Meredith, 1,013 yards rushing on 87 carries, 13 touchdowns for him. Musal, 89 carries for 1,119 yards, 13 touchdowns. They both average 11 to 12 yards per carry. They're very reliant as well. Hoover averaging 8.8 yards per carry, 847 rushing yards on 96 carries, 14 touchdowns. Again, he leads the team in rushing TDs. When they do pass the ball, they do have 2 receivers they go to, although they have not reached the end zone yet. Obviously, Meredith is one of them, 4 catches for 76 yards. The other is a junior who has 9 catches for 75 yards, and that is, hang on a second, Cooper Pattison. And so this team does not throw the ball much, but when they do, they are pretty effective in getting passing yards. But passing yards are used as something of a need when needed upon in situational football, but they don't use it as something that's a key part of what they do on the offense. They're primarily a run-first team, so they block well. Their tight ends are heavily involved in the blocking game. The quarterback's involved in the running game. That's what makes North Miami as dominant as they are up front. Defensively speaking, again, you're looking at a team that's also very stout there as well, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But you look at North Miami, they played those 2 postseason games with Northfield and Southwood. They took care of business easily against Northfield, 47-6 at Northfield, a former TRC foe there. Let's see here. Come on. There we go. So they had 3 players rushing for over 100 yards that game. Meredith and Musel both had 119 yards rushing. Meredith with 3 TDs, Musel with 1. Hoover ran for 129 yards on 9 carries with a pair of TDs for him. And when you look on defense, it's very balanced across the board. I mean, you got a senior on this team in Jordan Simon who led with 10 tackles, but they're a team that blocks well. They block hard. It's a pretty good, sound team up front. And you've got a senior in Braylon McIntyre, their free safety with a pass deflection fumble recovery there. So North Miami, they're a hardworking team. They play physical. They pound the rock. You know what to expect with North Miami with the way they run their offense. The game against Southwood, it was only a 16-10 North Miami lead after the first quarter. They scored 31 in the second quarter to take it would be a 47-17 lead at the half. And obviously they would eventually have a running clock, and Southwood got some garbage points along the way, and North Miami ended up winning by 31 points. So that's where we're at for North Miami. No stats were provided in that game against Southwood on the North Miami side, but you get a sense of just how strong they are up front for the North Miami Warriors. And if Fremont is going to win their first sectional championship for the Fremont Eagles in program history, right? They have not won more than 1 postseason game since 2001. The last time they played for a sectional championship, they fell to Southern Wells. Yes, the Southern Wells Raiders in the sectional championship game. And you know what happened to Southern Wells? They went on to win the whole thing in Class 1A. So they ran into a powerhouse in Southern Wells during the early 2000s and the late 90s, where you had to play Southern Wells and you had to play Adams Central, right? Even Central Noble was in the same sectional at one point for the Fremont Eagles, right? You look at the history of Fremont and North Miami in the playoffs. They have met a few times before. They met in 1991. North Miami won that game. It was a semifinal game, if I remember, because they ultimately lost to Jimtown in the sectional finals. Fremont would go on to win some sectional championships in the 90s. They made 2 runs to semi-state in 93, 94, and then they won the whole thing in 1993. And then 1997, they beat North Miami 42-8, which they eventually fell to Adams Central in the sectional championship game. They played North Miami the next year. They won that one 35-14 in that game. And let's see, what's the last time they played North Miami? They played them last in 2019 and then 2024. They played them last year, actually. So then in 2019, they played North Miami the first round. They lost by 13, 51-38 at North Miami. And then last year they lost to them in the, I believe they lost to them in the semifinals, 35-7 to North Miami, which they went on to win the sectional against Triton on their way to falling to South Adams in regionals. But Fremont has had some success before against North Miami. Obviously, they've never won a sectional championship before in football. How big would that be for the smallest school in the NACC to win their first football sectional championship against a really good North Miami attack? Would be critical for Fremont. It's also going to be a long bus ride for the Fremont Eagles. It's all the way down to Miami County, so it's going to be a long bus ride for the Fremont fans and for the players and coaches alike. But if they can get this win, boy, what type of road trip would that be for the Fremont Eagles if they can get that type of win against North Miami? It's going to be a good game. I think this will be a competitive game, but can Fremont stop the run of North Miami? I think that's going to be key here because that is North Miami's bread and butter. All right, let's take a look at Class 2A. We're going to start with 36. Eastern Greentown against Eastbrook is the matchup. Eastbrook is the host of this sectional championship game. And you look at Eastbrook, we all know about the Miracle at Alexandria. We are not going to go too much into depth about it because we've already talked about it ad nauseum from our last episode. The game against Rochester, Eastbrook took advantage of that game early and often. They were aggressive in that game against Rochester. They took advantage of some costly Rochester turnovers on Halloween Friday. And, obviously Bodie Howell did what Bodie Howell does best, but, Ryder Gibson had a really good game against the Zebras, as well as their tight end for Eastbrook, Jacob McDermott had a nice game as well for Eastbrook against Rochester. Gibson with 4 rushing TDs at Rochester. And, this was a game that was a 21-14 game at the half, and yet the Eastbrook Panthers continue to apply the pressure and put on the gas at Rochester. A really good Rochester team that had one of the best scoring defenses in the history of the Zebras, a TRC champion that beat Maconaqua, defending TRC champion. So Eastbrook did a really good job of putting up a really good game plan and really going for the kill, if you would, in theory, against the Rochester Zebras. And now you look at the sectional championship game against the defending sectional champions, the Eastern Greentown Comets. 10-1 of the season are Eastern Greentown. Their lone loss came in the hands of Taylor, 1A Taylor, back on September 12th. 21-20. They're averaging 42 points per game. They are giving up only 17, but keep in mind that Eastern Greentown does play a Hoosier Heartland Conference schedule. It's a very 1A heavy schedule for Eastern Greentown, so we have to understand that their competition is quite a bit different from what Eastbrook's had to face. Eastern Greentown did not play a 4A school this year. They only played 2 3A schools, which were Oak Hill, South Oak Hill team in the CIC, I should say, and Northwestern, who's decent in the TRC, but I wouldn't consider the greatest TRC team in the universe. Definitely not better than Rochester. Eastern Greentown, 10-1 this season. You looked at that, and obviously they'll be relying heavily on their junior quarterback in Gibson Eagle. Again, kind of funny that they're called his last name is Eagle because there's been a handful of bird names in this sectional and other places across the state, but Gibson Eagle is a really solid quarterback for the Comets. 15 of 196. Cut this. Edit. 115 of 196 passing for 1,953 yards, 25 touchdowns, just 4 picks on the season. They are not a team that runs the ball too much, but they are pretty balanced as a whole, and they're led by a senior in Isaiah Pickard. He's got nearly 1,000 yards rushing on the season for him. For the Comets, they also have a nice wide receiver in Bentley Hollinger, a wide receiver and strong safety. He's got 40 catches for 898 yards, 16 touchdowns. So they are very much a spread offense, and that is going to be a challenge for Eastbrook because unlike Rochester that runs a wing tee, they're more like an Alexandria in a way because they do throw the ball at a good number. The problem with Eastern Greentown is I don't think they're quite as explosive as Alexandria. When you look at the quality of competition Eastern Greentown faces, they just don't play the same level of competition that Alexandria and Eastbrook do. But I still think even then, it's still going to be a challenge with Eastern Greentown because they can spread the ball at will. And they got some athletes for a school as small as Eastern Greentown that can make plays. And Eastern Greentown is in Howard County for those that don't know where they're at. They took care of business easily against Blackford in the first round, 53-7. We expected that from the Comets. Eagles 6 of 8 passing, 219 yards, 2 TDs for him. Payday with 130 rushing yards, 7 carries, and a pair of touchdowns for him. They had 5 rushing TDs in that game. Took care of business early and often against Blackford. But the Tipton game was an interesting one because this was a shootout against the Blue Devils of Tipton, a very good Hoosier Conference team. 41-40, Eastern winner. It was a lot closer game than I think Eastern would have liked against Tipton, who scored 19 of their 40 points in the fourth quarter. So it was a lot closer game than I think Eastern would have liked. But nevertheless, a great game no less for the Comets. Eagle, 18-22 passing for 302 yards, 3 touchdowns. They also had a kind of a trick play from Caleb Hurts, who threw a 60-yard touchdown pass as well. Picked 100 rushing yards on 17 carries, no touchdowns. The only touchdown rush on the ground came from Hurts. 14-yard touchdown run for him. That was the only carry in that game. Hollinger, 10 catches for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, again, with Eastern Greentown, they got some weapons on this team that can cause some problems for Eastbrook if they are not defensively aligned, right? Eagle has 11 tackles. He's also a strong safety. 1 TFL for him. Another name we have not mentioned yet, senior Owen Toll, a linebacker, 12 tackles, 11 solo for him. So he's a good guy. So he's a good linebacker on that Comet squad. You got a junior that we've not mentioned in Richard Biddle. He's got 10 tackles, 1 TFL for him. So they got some guys that can do their job pretty well, so to speak. Now, can Eastern Greentown force turnovers? They didn't really do that against Tipton. They didn't get after the quarterback very well against the Blue Devils. Can they do that this week against Eastbrook? That's going to be a tall task because Eastbrook is very good. I mean, whether it's McDermott or if it's Gibson or if it's Matt Slater, their wide receiver, or obviously Bodie Howe, who is a complete stud on that Eastbrook skill position as a quarterback. You know, can Eastern Greentown be able to create some pressure? I think that's going to be a challenge here. Can they take something out of that Alexandria game that they can utilize in that game? Because otherwise, I do have a hard time believing that they're going to beat Eastbrook, because I don't know if Eastern Greentown has played that type of competition of Eastbrook this year. Oak Hill is probably the closest to that, but I just have my question marks on how Eastern Greentown is going to be able to slow down this high-power Eastbrook run attack. And it's not the fact they just run the football. They move the ball so quickly, high-tempo offense. They just create so many problems for the defenses to slow them down. And if they're not disciplined and they're not able to get after Bodie Howe, if they can't hold them to 3-and-out drives, I think it's going to be a hard time for Eastern Greentown to win this game. But we'll see. That's why you play these games. 2A35, East Side at Adams Central. Obviously, the Jets will be heavy favorites coming in, but East Side's a respectable team. 9-2 record for them. They've had a nice year. You know, they had a close game against Adams Central week 2, although let's be completely respectful here. Adams Central, in all fairness, was also shorthanded in that game. And so that kind of made the score a little bit closer than what it could have been if Adams Central was in full strength. Not to discredit East Side's performance, but it's to say that Adams Central was a little bit shorthanded early in the season. These two teams are different at this point in the season, right? But still, East Side gave a good fight in that game. The other loss for East Side came against Churubusco, 19-14 game. That was a game East Side probably could have won that game. And, you know, had East Side not had those 2 costly defensive scores that Churubusco scored from Bryce Lawrence, you know, East Side's winning this football game potentially because, you know, Busco's offense up until halftime, they had a lot of trouble getting any type of positive gain on the ground for Churubusco. Not until the second half that we saw maybe some positive gains being built from the offense, but it took Churubusco a long time before the Eagles were able to get any type of momentum on the offense side of the football. Bryce Lawrence was key in that game against East Side. East Side, we know what they are. They're going to be a team that they run kind of that that flex bone type of offense, if you would. They are a team that is heavily reliant on the run attack of the Blazers. Joe Bridgman, their junior quarterback, has been sensational this year for the Eastside Blazers. He's throwing for 1,184 yards, 56% completion, 17 TDs, just 3 picks, which he had a rough game against Churubusco. That was one of his not the best games when it comes to turnovers. He had a rough game against Churubusco from that standpoint, but still played well nonetheless. Besides that point, rushing wise, he's rushing for 1,628 yards, 193 carries, 20 rushing TDs for Joe Bridgman. So he is a really good and athletic quarterback for the Eastside Blazers. He also plays free safety on defense for him. You got Ty Siebert, their sophomore linebacker, who can also do a little bit of running back, 7.5 tackles per game for him. Sam Pittman with 4 sacks as a senior. Jake Worsler, he's kind of been a tight end type of player for the Blazers. Middle linebacker, outside linebacker. He's got 2 picks. He had a big game against Manchester, which we'll briefly mention in a moment. Worsler pretty good on defense, I mentioned earlier. And then let's go ahead and just kind of briefly recap these 2 games. Obviously, they took care of business against Whitco, 48-0 in that ball game. Richmond was good as usual. He had a 200 some rush combined yards on passing rushing. We had Noah Dove, who ran for 74 yards, I believe, against the Cats in that ball game. Again, with Eastside, pretty balanced all-around performance on offense against the Cats. A team that's only had 1 win on the season, which we expected Eastside to win that game. And then defensively, you look here, you got let me just kind of explain here. Gage Focal, 8 tackles for him. You got our freshman Andrew McLean with 6. Siebert with 7, as I mentioned earlier. 2 sacks for the Blazers. Pretty good game there. And you had a 42-3 win against Manchester. We thought this one might be close. And early on, it was only a 7-3 Eastside game lead after 1. And then they just kind of blew them out of this game from the next 2 quarters onward. 21 points second quarter, got the running clock going in the third quarter, and cruised to victory lane. Richmond, 151 yards passing on 4 or 5 completions, 3 touchdown passes. He also ran for 130 yards on 14 carries and a touchdown for him. Dove, 99 yards rushing on 8 carries, 2 touchdowns for him. And then Wars, 75 yards receiving on 2 catches, 2 TDs. And you look on defense, led by Worsler, 10 tackles, 1 TFL for him. You got a senior on that defense in Kyson Hewitt, 6 tackles, 2 TFLs. And then Sam Pittman, 6 tackles, 1 TFL. Another senior on that team, Corbin Gardner, with 10 tackles. Worsler also with a pick and a caused fumble. So good game for Jake Worsler in that game against the Manchester Squires. This is going to be an entirely different ball game against Adams Central. They are the Jets. Jets, Jets, right? And they are defending state champions in Class 2A. Other than those first couple of weeks where they were shorthanded, kind of going through those early season lumps, Adams Central has been very much Adams Central. They just don't give opposing teams very much of a chance to make this close for 4 quarters, for the most part. And, you look at the postseason for Adams Central. Absolutely shredded Central Noble in the first round, 70-13. The Bluffton game, however, was a lot closer than what the record score would indicate to you. They won that game 35-14, but that was a game that was a 1 or 2 score game for almost the entirety of the game until late in the fourth quarter, when Adams Central had Jamison Roach making that incredible 75-yard run, one of the greatest plays in Jets history. They scored that touchdown run from Thomas Laughlin. It makes it a 2-score game, 28-14. Bluffton goes down near the length of the field. They go for it on a 4th down, trying to get some type of play to get a touchdown from 35 yards out. They just missed that potential touchdown pass by inches. Bluffton turns it over on downs, and the Jets go down the length of the field, get first downs like crazy, and Laughlin gets his 3rd touchdown of the game, and the Jets win 35-14. I don't know if Eastside's going to be able to make this as interesting as what Bluffton did last week, because obviously with Bluffton, you have the pass attack led by Aston Best. You have the 2 running backs of Kamel Moore and Cooper Craig. They got some really good kids up front as well. And not to say Eastside isn't good, but they're going to have a tall task ahead of them against the Jets. They're going to have to go down to Monroe. They're going to go down to Adams County. They're going to go down to the atmosphere in Adams Central where they have not lost a home hardly at all in the past several years. And they're going to have to come up with a game plan to how to slow down Jamison Roach. How can you slow down this really good junior quarterback in Jamison Roach defensively? How do you keep the Jets' wing T from causing all kinds of chaos that they do best? And then offensively, how can we contain Cam Fravel and the big boys up front that they're good at? And I mean, Fravel's just one name of several Jets that are really good at tackling and getting to the quarterback. How in the world can you contain this line and be able to put Joe Richmond in positions to be successful and get the Blazers in decent field position? Because in the Bluffton game, Aston Best had a hard time getting any type of rhythm throwing the football against the Jets. I don't know how Eastside's going to find that rhythm in this game because they don't throw the ball at the level of Bluffton. They just don't play that style of football. And so Eastside's going to have to come up with some type of game plan to attempt to contain this really good Adams Central team. I think Eastside's going to make this as interesting as possible early, but can they compete with them for 4 quarters? That's going to be a challenge. Now, one thing I will tell you with Eastside, no matter if they win or lose this game, they're going to play their 110% best effort in the game. Those kids work their butts off just to keep it PG-13. They work their butts off in any game, regardless if they win or lose games. They work their tails off. They have a really good defensive front. They work their tails off. And so this team is going to give their best effort. And this Eastside team is going to throw some punches. They're going to go for it, and they're going to swing for the fences. But can they play 4 quarters of Eastside football and play clean enough football? They got to play near perfect football against Adams Central. Can they attempt to do so against the Jets? Because this is going to be a tough football game for the Blazers on Friday night. All right, let's take a look at, Class 3A, Sectional 28, Bishop Lures at Mississauga. I'm trying to pick up the pace here because we're at 34 minutes already, so I want to pick up the pace just a little bit here. Ole Miss is the host of this matchup against the Bishop Lures Knights. 10-1 this season are the Ole Miss Indians, averaging 32 points per game. They're only giving up 9.5 points per game. They do play 2A schedule, a little bit 3A kind of flavored in there. They only play one 4A school, and that's Marion. Marion's not the best 4A team in the universe. I know that because I've seen Marion play, but Ole Miss is a pretty good team, pretty respectable program. They've been a consistent contender from the CIC for several years now, even with a first-year head coach in Jeremy Lautner, a Eastbrook grad who's now taking the job at Mississauga. And, the first 2 rounds, defense has been key in those first 2 games. 21-7 win over Oak Hill, their conference rivals. Elijah Monday, 23 carries, 113 yards, 1 touchdown. And you got a sophomore in Levi Crandall, 16 carries, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground for him. They don't throw the ball much. That's not what their DNA is. Jacob Schwartz is a respectable quarterback. He is efficient when he needs to throw the ball, but they don't do it very much. And so, at least not this year's team doesn't. And so they're going to have to be a team that is going to be fundamentally sound. They take care of the football. They put pressure on Bishop Lures' defense, and they're going to have to get some first downs because we know with Bishop Lures, they have the athletes. And if you give Bishop Lures extra chances, they're going to make you pay. They have won multiple state championships, right? We're looking at Bishop Lures' history. Their incredible football history in football. At Fort Wayne Bishop Lures, the Bishop Lures Knights have won a grand total of 12 state championships in Bishop Lures' history. You don't win 12 state championships without being a team that's fundamentally sound and takes advantage of other teams' mistakes. And that's the thing about Mississauga is unlike Oak Hill and Jay County, Bishop Lures is a whole nother beast that you're going to have to take care of. And I know this because I cover Fort Wayne. I know what Bishop Lures is. So Ole Miss is going to have their hands full on Friday. But you look at the matchup in round 2 against Jay County, 36-7 win for Ole Miss. against the Patriots. Decent team under Coach Fields, but nowhere near the athleticism of Mississauga. Monday, again, was amazing. 14 carries, 119 yards, 2 rushing TDs for him. And then you got the wide receiver in Callan Quaterwood with five catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown catch for him. Again, hardworking team on defense. Other than Monday, right? Monday's the big star at Ole Miss. Sometimes Crandall, but Elijah Monday's the big star at Ole Miss. Other than that, they're a team with a lot of really good players. Not a lot of big names at Ole Miss, but they do their jobs exceptionally well. And that's what Ole Miss is good at. And they're really good at, for the most part, of stopping the run. Now, the question for Ole Miss is going to be testing the athletes of Fort Wayne Bishop Luers. And again, regardless of Bishop Luers' record, 6-5, you think, okay, Bishop Luers isn't a great team. Here's the problem. Bishop Luers plays in the SAC. And when you play in the SAC, you're going to get everybody's best every week. You're playing some of the best competition in all of Indiana, regardless of class. And Luers is one of, if not the smallest school in the SAC. They're going to take their lumps every year because it's Bishop Luers and they play in the SAC. Okay. You look at those 2 wins. Delta is a good win for Bishop Luers. Delta is a decent 3-win team that play in a hard conference, and Luers took full advantage of that against Delta on the road. You got a lot of sophomores at Luers, really talented sophomore class that's going to get better. Thomas Riker, the quarterback, 14-28 passing, 239 yards, 1 TD for him. You got another sophomore and running back TJ Epperson, 10 carries, 94 yards, 2 rushing TDs for him. On the passing game, they are very balanced at Bishop Luers, but in this Delta game, it was primarily to Darion Carswell, 4 catches, 98 yards, no touchdown catches. That 1 touchdown catch came from Rory Kelly, who had a 45 yards catch, receiving on 2 catches for him. Riker does make his mistakes. He had a lost fumble in that game against Delta, but they're a young team. They're inexperienced by Bishop Luers' standard, but it is a very talented Luers team. Look in that Delta game, you look at a senior in Christian Brell, led the way in tackles, 8, 1 TFL for him, 3 sacks from Luers, led by a really good defensive tackle and senior Jerron Taylor. He had 2 sacks. They also had 3 QB hurries. So again, Bishop Luers, you know what to expect with Luers. They're going to have a good quarterback. They're going to have good athletes. They're going to hang their hats on being the hardest team to play against, and they're going to bring their explosive athleticism to the table. Then you look at the Norwell game. Norwell upset Heritage in the first round, so Luers had to play Norwell in the second round. It was a close game in the first quarter. Only 14-6 Luers after 1. 28-12. It was not that convincing the first half for Bishop Luers, and then they outscored them 17-0 in the second half. Their defense was great against Norwell in the second half, and Luers eventually pulled their way to a dominant win against the Norwell Knights. Riker, 14-19 passing, 177 yards, 2 TDs for him. And then you had a breakout game from sophomore Brandon Gaither II, 13 carries, 147 yards. He had a touchdown run of his own. And the run game was proficient, especially against the Norwell Knights. Brell, again, 11 tackles for him. You got another senior in Ale Taylor, another Taylor Luers, 1 sack, 6 yards lost, 4 QB hurries. So he's getting after quarterbacks consistently all season long for Bishop Luers. They also had 3 defensive interceptions. Carswell had 1. Brell had 1. And then another one from Brandon Migrant, another senior. 14-yard interception return for him. And then Riker had a fumble recovery as well. So Bishop Luers is really good defensively. We know that. They don't score a lot of points at Luers. Not in the SAC competition, they don't usually. But Luers they're going to hang their hats on the defense. And if Ole Miss is going to win this game, they have got to take care of the football. They have got to be able to take advantage of the red zone opportunities. And they have got to make sure that Thomas Riker does not go bananas in that game. Because if Riker and those sophomores, they're able to get looks and they're able to take advantage, Ole Miss is in big trouble. You cannot allow Bishop Luers to do what they do best on the offense, and you've got to take care of the football. Because if they don't, Bishop Lures is going to win this game by 3 or 4 scores because it's Bishop Lures. I don't care that the record 6-5. It's Bishop Lures. You expect them to be good. We'll talk about Garrett Angola in just a moment here, but I just want to briefly, and as well as Easton Dwayner, but I just want to briefly look at 5A section 11, Concord versus Northside. Concord, close game for about 3 quarters against Warsaw. They eventually pulled away, 45-28 win over Warsaw. Obviously with Concord, Bo Brunner had another great game at quarterback for the Minutemen. They are a spread offense at Concord. So they're going to do what they do best on that side. But I think one name we have to make sure we mention consistently, and specifically in that game against Warsaw, is Reese Brevard. Reese Brevard, following that 4th down stop, he ran 91 yards on the first play from scrimmage for a touchdown. He ended up with 10 carries for 134 yards and a touchdown. Brunner, he had 8 carries for 77 yards and 3 TDs. Brunner, 9 of 12 passing for 90 yards and a TD. They were much more of a run team in the game against Warsaw, and primarily, I think a lot of it's because of Warsaw's exceptional defense. I think they knew they were going to be tested against the Tigers, so they went more into pounding the rock once again against the Tigers. And then you look at defensively, they got some dudes up front that could absolutely hit the nail to the hammer, if you would. And junior Carson Wyrick, you got another junior in Eli Castaneda, and a junior in Derek Gomez, who was getting some love preseason. 13 tackles for Gomez, 15 for Castaneda, 16 for Wyrick. And he also got 8 from another senior in Parker Schaefer, who's also tight end. They're a really well-rounded Concord squad. A lot of good athletes on that team. They're not a one-trick pony with Concord. So then you get to Northside, and Northside's the tested team. They played the gauntlet of the SAC, 6-4 in the season. Nice win against Goshen on the road. And when you look at the Legends, they run a spread as well. But, Jaden Rivers, one of the great quarterbacks in the history of the Northside Legends. So he only had 7-10 passing for 65 yards. They went to the run more in this game against Goshen, but Rivers is the quarterback that can throw for 300 yards. So be careful and watch out for Jaden Rivers in the game against Concord. By the way, Northside's the host of this game. You got a really good running back in Caleb Kingley, 12 carries, 135 yards, 2 rushing TDs. They only had 4. They had 4 rushing TDs in that game, 211 yards rushing for them. And the receiving, they go to quite a few guys. They got Sebastian Moore and Jannard Moore. They got BJ Johnson on that team, Ben Davis, Sutton Yorko. Really good group of wide receivers at Northside. And then defensively, you look at some seniors there like Jalen Jackson, Jason Early, a junior in Jamarcus Martin. Again, Jannard Moore, their corners, also does well defensively as well. You got another junior in Omarion Waits. 11 tackles for him in that game is Goshen. It had 8 sacks against Goshen. And I think that's something Concord's got to be careful on Friday night, is they got to protect Brunner well against the Northside Legends. Martin with 3 sacks by himself. And then you got another player in number 3. If I can get his name real quick, just for some reason it's not letting me do so. And that is Leslie Woodson, a junior defensive end. Also really good defensive end for the Legends. So they're a nice ball club. I think their record is very deceiving. They're a really talented Legends team. And I think Concord's head coach, Craig Kaler, said it best. Northside's really good. And they've got a lot of athletes. They're going to make plays. The thing with Concord is can they make enough plays? They did not make enough plays last year in the sectional championship game against Warsaw. They're going to have to make plays this year against a really good Northside team on the road at Chambers Field against a team that has not won a sectional championship since the beautiful year of 1990. Can the Concord Minutemen get it done this time around? We'll see, because it's going to be I think this is going to be a fun game in 5A Sectional 11. Let's see here. 6A, Sectional 2, Northup faces Carroll. We got about 46 minutes here, so we want to pick up the pace a little bit here. Carroll versus Northup, the rematch from the essentially was a decisive game in the SAC race on October 10th at Northup. Carroll won that game 48-37. Carroll started the season 1-3, one of their worst start in nearly 20 years at Carroll. Actually, it was the worst start in 20 years for the Carroll Chargers, right? Not the most ideal start for them, right? But they were playing Hamilton Southeastern without their number one wide receiver, Jaden Van Pelt. They were playing Center Grove, a game that was very much within striking distance, but just couldn't quite get it done against Center Grove, right? They destroyed Concordia, and then they lost kind of a tough one against Bishop Dwayne. That one kind of stings, even looking back at it now. It still stings a little bit for Carroll because that was a game that Carroll potentially could have won the SAC, and this was the Lucas Gwen game. We'll just call it that because Lucas Gwen set the school record, which he would eventually break it again later this season. But this was essentially the Lucas Gwen game for the Bishop Dwayne Saints. And 9-6 win for Dwayne. That was a tough one to swallow for Carroll. But they have done a good job since then. And ever since then, they have won their last 6. And they have done so almost convincingly. I mean, every game they've won has been by double figures for Carroll. And they absolutely annihilated Elkhart last week. That's a solid Elkhart team that competed for the NIC championship this year, and they absolutely took the atmosphere out of this game at Elkhart. You know, you got their quarterback, Gabe Freisinger, just a junior, 17-25 passing, 222 yards, 1 touchdown pass, only 1 TD pass, but still efficient, no less. Very balanced game all around, and then you got the receiving game doing what it does best, led by Jaden Van Pelt, 5 catches, 80 yards, and you get the 1 touchdown pass from Harrison Sheely. And then defensively, you look at Carroll. Great athletes around. Balanced team across the board. I don't know why. My apologies. And then let's see here. Eli Newhouser with 12 tackles for him for the Carroll Chargers. You got, let's see here. Liam Keys with 6. 3 sacks for them. They had 3 interceptions. I'm pretty sure one of them went for a touchdown in that game. They had 1 fumble recovery in this game. So Carroll, we know what to expect with the Chargers. They got athletes galore, right? They have the structure. They're disciplined defensively under Doug Dinan. Northrop's kind of the Cinderellas of the Fort Wayne, Indiana. Nobody expected Northrop to do squats going into the season. At least most of them didn't. We knew Northrop had the talent, but we didn't know Northrop could be a real threat in the SAC. And it turns out they kind of were a threat. And really, if you look back at the season, Northrop was 1-2 plays away from beating Homestead. And they were, I don't know, maybe 1 complete quarter away from maybe giving some trouble. I mean, you look at this game, Northrop 8-2, their best season since 2003. Obviously, it's one of the best seasons since 1999 when they won their last sectional championship at Northrop. The Bruins, we know what to expect with Northrop. They got the weapons of the Bruins, led by David Callison, a really, really good quarterback for the Northrop Bruins. And he's got 2,533 yards passing, 25 touchdown passes, 9 picks. He does have his moments with interceptions, but overall, very good quarterback nonetheless. One of the best quarterbacks in Northrop history. In terms of the run game, 1,500 yards rushing, but it's a very balanced backfield for Northrop, led in part by Levi Porty, their junior, as well as another junior in Kobe Reese. And Levi Porty was a hero, scoring the game-winning touchdown against Bishop Dwayne in that ball game. So we know Northrop's got some athletes. We know that's something we know best for them there. And then obviously a Northrop offense is not complete without mentioning the Ohio State commit in Quade Guilford, 42 catches, 889 yards, 12 touchdowns for him. But I will say this, they do have some weapons around them. They're pretty good as well. Another one is sophomore and Maddox Wheel, who, not too far behind Quade Guilford and whatnot. And you look at a guy like Maddox Wheel, he, 850 yards receiving, 50 on 52 catches, 7 touchdowns for him. Wheel was critical in that game against Snyder, to which Northrop defeated Snyder for the first time ever in overtime. Right? It was also their first ever overtime win in the playoffs in Northrop history. It's the first time since the 80s, I think, that Northrop's beaten Snyder twice, which is rare these days for Northrop because they've struggled so much in football. And, Northrop, this is the last year of Northrop Snyder sharing Spooler Stadium. Next year and onward, it's going to be all Northup. Snyder's going to have their brand new state-of-the-art facility being completed for next season. So kind of a bittersweet season, if you would, for Snyder and Northup, because they're no longer going to be sharing Spooler Stadium after this season. Callison against Snyder, 221 yards passing. Only 16 of 35 completion, but still was efficient when needed to. And then obviously, Gil for 133 yards receiving on 7 catches, 1 TD. Maddox, 60 yards receiving on 5 catches, 1 touchdown. But I think the hero in that game, when we look back on this game, the overtime win, I think we look back at Pi Soon. I hope I've said his name correctly. I apologize if I mispronounce it. The sophomore kicker, he hit the game-winning PAT, which it caromed off the uprights and then in, as the Northup Bruins won that game 17-16 overtime. And forever we call this the Doink Heard Around Spooler, just to make sure we find some type of funny name to make it memorable. But anyway, Northup and Carroll at Carroll. Can Northup win their first sectional since 1999? They have struggled with Carroll historically. They don't win against Carroll very much in football. So we'll see what Northup can do, but they're going to have to play better defense. They're going to have to be much sharper on both ends if Northup is going to have a chance at winning their first sectional since the beautiful year of 1999. Let's get to Class 3A. Garrett versus Angola, sectional 26. Garrett defeated Fairfield in the first round of sectionals, 7-0. At Fairfield, kind of your gritty Garrett-like win right there. Second round, they shut out Lakeland 21-0. Right? Garrett has, that's their only 2 shutouts of the season, ironically enough. And Garrett is only giving up 13.7 points per game. They have not given up more than 21 points in a game since September 19th when they lost by 36 to Eastside. Okay. Garrett's defense has played really well, but I think their offense has slowly gotten better each game, right? And so with Garrett, I think we know what to expect with the Railroaders. They're not going to score a lot of points. That's not what this year's team's kind of built. Yes, they're going to have Alex Guzman do what Alex Guzman does best at running back. They're junior. He had 109 yards rushing on 11 carries and a touchdown against Lakeland. You also got a senior in Carter Fielden, 91 yards rushing, 12 carries, 2 TDs for Coach Chris Albertine's Garrett Railroaders. They're balanced power run attack for the Railroaders. And then defensively, you're looking at Garrett, very balanced team. A lot of veteran guys like Aiden Hunt, Chase Adley. We know Guzman. We know what he does defensively. Fielden, Jake Gagne, Blake Lewis. Braden Newsbaum is a beast on the defensive side of the football. You got Aiden Reed, a lot of familiar names from last year. Josh Holdle, Jackson McDowell. It's a really, really good defense. And also, we want to make sure we mention Caden Bush, who I believe is also their starting quarterback recently at Garrett. So that's kind of worthy a note there. But, with Garrett, you know what to expect. If you've grown up in this area, you know what Garrett is. They are going to pound the rock. They're going to milk a bunch of clock. And they're going to play the most physical football you're ever going to face. It's Garrett football. Garrett is known for being the biggest pain in the you-know-what out there. It's lunch pail football. If you're going to beat Garrett, you better grow your big boy pants on, and you better put on your hard helmet and working boots. If you don't outwork Garrett, you don't beat them. It's plain and simple. You have to outwork this team, and you have to force them to make mistakes. That is Garrett in a nutshell. Angola knows Garrett more than anybody else. Okay, where was I at? Angola, right? So the Hornets. Now, this was a team that we did not expect them to be in this position, right? Or most people did not expect them to be in this position. Now, Angola's been a tested team all year. They've played some good teams. DeKalb and Leo, West Snowball, obviously, Lakeland, Fairfield. They played Andrean on October 3rd. They played Garrett already. They beat them by 3. Played Eastside, only lost by 5. We know Angola's a battle-tested team. So they drew a pretty brutal schedule. Really, they drew probably the hardest of the 2 teams. Garrett, I think, was more manageable. Angola's was definitely the harder schedule going into this tournament. Playing Tippy Valley at home, which was probably the good thing for Angola, and then having to go to West Snowball to beat the Chargers, who won the Big School Division. Angola did a really good job against Tippy Valley. They held Wes Parker to 95 yards rushing. And that seems like a lot of rushing yards, but Wes Parker can get you 200 rushing yards. They held him in check. They frustrated Hunter Stage to only 6 passing yards, 2 picks, 7-11 completion. They made life hard for Tippy Valley in that game, and then Hawk Hasselman did what Hawk Hasselman does best. And when Hawk Hasselman runs, we say, here comes the Hawk, and all the hoorah with Angola. The West Snowball game was interesting because they struggled to score points for the majority of that game in West Snowball. They were down 20-7 after 3 quarters. It looked like the season was over for Angola, and West Snowball was going to play Garrett for the sectional championship. No. Angola puts up an incredible fourth quarter comeback, 2 scores, and they win this game 21-20 over West Snowball to play for the sectional championship against Garrett at home. You look at the Hornets team. It's a team effort with Angola. You got the senior at Angola, Brady Ravis. What a story for him. 10 of 15 passing, 1 or 2 yards. He got a touchdown pass. He did have a pick, but still, the touchdown pass mattered when it needed most. And then we have to mention Alex Thomas, senior for him. He doesn't want to go home not playing for a sectional championship. He doesn't want his Angola career to end without playing for a sectional championship. 50 yards receiving, 7 catches for him. And then we got to mention the Hawk himself. The Hawk Hasselman, 28 carries, 148 yards. He had 2 rushing TDs. And how about this? 2 catches for 51 yards and an additional touchdown. Hawk Hasselman, the MVP of the Angola Hornets for the past 2 years or so. And Hawk Hasselman being the leader and the guy he is, a gamer for the Angola Hornets. And now they are sitting 1 win away from their first sectional since repeating as sectional champions back in 2017 and 2018. But to do that, they have got to take care of Andy Thomas's old team, Garrett Railroaders, the Big Train, the defending sectional champions, the team that made it all the way into semi-state last year. They're going to have to figure out how to score some points against that physical Garrett defense. And it's going to be a war. Anytime you got Angola and Garrett on Friday Night Football, it is a war between these 2 teams. They do not like each other on the football field. And we expect this to be a WWE SmackDown between Angola and Garrett's on Friday night. These 2 play physical football. They run the ball a lot with these 2 teams. And it's going to be smack mouth football. This is if you like classic football, this is the place to be. Because these 2 are going to play physical. They're going to play hard. It's going to be a battle to see who's going to play for regionals next week. There's going to be no regrets coming out of this game. These 2 are going to put it all on the field on Friday night. And when you look at Angola, we know a bit of Dallas Davidson. We've seen some moments in his career with some big heroic moments. 8 tackles for him against West Snowball. You got Landon Buzzard, 6 tackles. And Alex Thomas, Andy's son, 6 tackles, 1.5 TFLs. You got a sophomore and Cooper Weisenauer with 4 tackles. Hawk with 8 tackles. You got another one in Keith and Duncan, a senior, 4 tackles. You got the sophomore, Niles Knotts. We know in basketball, 6 tackles, 2 TFLs. You got a freshman in Owen Shaw. We're going to know more about him next year. 4 tackles. Senior, Lucas Lentz, 10 tackles. 2 sacks for the Hornets. Alex with 1.5 sacks. Alex is a complete freight train. He is a big boy. You don't mess with Alex Thomas when he's playing on the football field. 6'4", 230 pounds. He is a freight train for the Angola Hornets. Hornets defense, very good against West Snowball in the past. 8 passing deflections against the West Snowball Chargers. And then Castleman can do a little bit of everything but the catch and sink. He had 4 kickoffs in that game. 186 yards on special teams. Buzzer with 6 punts. Davison with his kickoff and punt returns. So you know this Angola team is very balanced. They're very athletic. Very fun football game on Friday night in our game of the week. We'll talk more about it in our game of the week preview, which we'll talk about the keys to the game between Angola and Garrett. And then last but certainly not least, we have got to mention the premier game at ANEC Sports 4A Sectional 19, East Snowball at Bishop Dwayner at Shields Field. And I think it's fitting for this particular sectional. We talked about this game with a sense of an entrance. Hit it. For a sectional 19, there are generals, there are archers, there are bulldogs, there are eagles and barons and saints and lions and knights. Oh my. And when you look at sectional 19, it's once again the same as last year. East Noble and Bishop Dwayne. They meet once again at Shields Field for the right to play for a sectional championship. You look at Columbia City, and they kind of cruised to the championship game. They dominated Leo in the first round in Bishop Dwayne fashion, 31-7, and then they did a really good job defensively against Columbia City, 21-0 for the Saints. Bishop Dwayne, we know what they are. It's the Saints' way of doing things. The whole teams are just 7 points per game. One of the best defenses out there in Dwayne history, which is comparing to the likes of the 1983 team that won state. 22 points per game. Dwayne plays fundamental football. They play hard-nosed, right? And Saints football is known for being a team that is known for being physical football and playing smart, high IQ football and playing for each other. It's a team called Bishop Dwayne. The Dwayne way, the Saints way of doing things. And people are going to get annoyed by that, but that is the way they do things. It's a formula that's worked for years, and they have continued that here in 2025. I'll talk a little bit more about Dwayne when I get to my interview with Rylee Biddle of East Noble, which leads to my next point. The East Noble Knights, undefeated on the season, reigning 4A state finalists from last year. They won the Northeast State for the 3rd year in a row. East Noble, for the most part, has been dominant, although they've had some challenges over the course of the season. They went through a couple of injuries early in the season, but they still went through it like flying colors, it seemed. They had a couple of tough games in weeks 4 and 5 at DeKalb and Leo, 2 games that could have went either way, especially the DeKalb game, where DeKalb was up with just 4 seconds left in that game before Rylee Biddle made the game-winning touchdown and 2-point conversion to win this game by 7 points. Leo, that was a game where it was a dogfight early on. It was kind of a defense-first ball game. And East Noble made a statement there and then kind of punched Leo in the mouth in the first half before it became more of a shootout and a 56-40 East Noble win. They dominated through the course of that several weeks. We get to sectionals. They took care of business against New Haven, like flying colors. And then you get to the Southside game. And Rylee will talk more about the Southside game, but he'll admit this was a difficult matchup. Southside Archers, kind of the underdogs of that sectional. They were overlooked. They were written off, if you would. Like, they have no chance against East Noble, and they made sure that Southside put their best effort in that big game against East Noble. They had opportunities in that game. Southside nearly pulled off the upset special. Probably one of the biggest upsets in IHSA history had Southside pulled it off. But in the end, they just could not stop Rylee Biddle and the East Noble Knights. Obviously, it was a team effort on both ends, particularly with guys like Austin Phillips. He made some big carries to set up some scores, particularly the game-winning score with 22 seconds left when Rylee Biddle scored from about 20-some yards out to win that game 35-28 over the Southside Archers, who had Chris Moon and Javon Irby, and I could go on and on with the Southside Archers. Just weapons for days. They pulled a lot of tricks up their sleeve in that East Noble game. Rylee Biddle, 202 rushing yards, 26 carries, 5 rushing TDs for him, as East Noble looks to repeat again as sectional champions against the Saints of Fort Wayne Bishop Dwayne. Again, tough task this year with East Noble. So I think to kind of quickly wrap things up here, as we will talk more about this game in the interview, East Noble, big game opportunity up ahead for them. You got the Knights with Rylee Biddle, and we got the Phillips kids, Alex and Austin Phillips. Alex Scott, great junior year at wide receiver and defensive back. One of the top players in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He's been one of the top players for interceptions. Got 4 on the season for him. You got Cohen Quake, 4.5 sacks. He'll mention more about these names in the interview. Aiden Lay, I can go on with East Noble. Great football team, right? And it's a team that's been consistent for a long time for the East Noble Knights as they look to get back to the state finals in Class 4A, but they got to take care of business, especially when you're in an elite defensive line that East Noble knows they're going to have to play much cleaner football this time around and cannot turn the ball over too often. They had, 4 turnovers against Southside. They can't have that this week against the Dwayne Saints, who are known for being a stout defensive team, and they got a really good kicker in Lucas Dwen, who can hit from 55. He can probably go NFL range. if he wanted to. That's how good he is of a kicker at Bishop Wayne, and that's something SAC fans have grown accustomed to, is having great kickers as well. So we'll talk more about that game in the interview with Rylee Biddle, the senior quarterback of the East Snowball Knights. And so I will turn over to my interview with Rylee Biddle. And until next time, have a great night of high school football, and we wish the best as we look to crown some sectional champions along the way. Joining me is the talented senior quarterback of the East Snowball Knights, Rylee Biddle, as his team is one win away from once again another sectional championship for the East Snowball Knights. Rylee, it's been a great season so far for your Knights. You're undefeated going into the championship game at Bishop Wayne coming up on Friday. But before we talk about the winter game, I just want to talk about how the senior season's gone so far, because you're coming off a state finals run last year. You have the success coming in this year, and you've been mostly dominant all season long. Just kind of take me through this entire season so far for East Snowball football up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, it all really started in the summer. We hit the weights hard. We hit the field hard, using up as much field time as you're allowed to, and just really bringing the bond together as a team. We lost a lot of seniors, and to be fair, those seniors were a big chunk of our team. So, to lift up those underclassmen and bring those guys along and come in the same mindset as us seniors, with the goals that we had set this year. I mean, that was really important to us. And then, I mean, our coaches honestly hit on it a little bit this past week, because Southside beat us at the PSM 7-on-7. But I think the PSM 7-on-7 was a big momentum boost for our skill guys. We were doubted just because we lost a lot of seniors, and winning that and then rolling into the season off that, I think that was huge for us. And just, I mean, as a team aspect, we've been great in all phases of the game. Special teams, our offensive and defensive line are incredible. Some of the best you'll see in this area. And then our skill guys to go along with that, it's a complete squad. You see these other teams and they got a bunch of big name athletes, and we might not have that, but we're going to put together a great game on Friday nights because we're a great team.
That indeed, you're right there in the top of the rankings in Class 4A. You look at this team. You mentioned the guys you lost from last year. Dylan Crow was obviously the big one. He won the Mental Attitude Award in the state finals. You bring in Alex Phillips' brother, Austin Phillips, a freshman, and obviously he's been such an immediate impact for your team on both ends of the field. You got your great defense back with ANEC and Tatum Getz and whatnot. Those guys have been incredible for the Knights. And then you got Alex Scott, who's breaking out as a junior. He had a great sophomore year, but really just had an even better season as a junior so far. Can you take me through some of the guys that have elevated their game so far, particularly with Austin Phillips, just a freshman, really looking like a baller on that football team?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll start with Austin. I mean, he was a big name coming into high school, and we knew that, he was going to provide for us pretty early. We knew he was going to be a varsity player, and, he wasn't going to sit out of any varsity games because, we knew the playmaker he was and the game changer he is. And I think it's just his speed is incredible. Not only from a running back standpoint, but at inside linebacker, he's able to play sideline to sideline and make plays, and that's been huge for us. I mean, I know there's been multiple weeks this week where I look at the tackle chart and he's got 12 solo tackles, and I mean, as a freshman, that's pretty crazy. And next, I'll definitely hit on the offensive and defensive line. Right now, we have our offensive line is 5 seniors, and I think that's very important to how our offense runs, because those guys get it, and they get, I mean, the goals and assignments every single week, and they're able to work together and in great ways and communicate in great ways, and just off the field as well. They're always together with one another, and I think that's been really huge. And then, last year, our defense was a big talk about our squad, but I think our defense this year has been just as good. Our defensive line in particular, we got Landon Mills, who's at nose. He shoots off the ball like a rocket every single play. And then Tatum Getz, Aiden Lay, and Cohen Quake also on that defensive line. I mean, those kids, they might not be the biggest kids, but they're fast kids, and they're good with their hands, and they're able to make plays and, get in the right gaps, cut kids down, hit them up top as well. I know Taden, he's a huge hitter. He makes some huge hits throughout this season. And then I think a place we've definitely struggled in, but have been shining some light on lately is, I mean, our back end of our defense. We're rotating a lot of guys, just trying to make sure everybody knows different positions because we don't have the most depth. And I think we've all stepped up in a big way, have been able to make plays when we need them. We definitely got to be a little bit more disciplined. You know, we have some slip ups in the secondary, and I think that definitely costs us here and there. But I mean, yeah, Alex Scott, he's a ball hawk. He's also got to show that on the offensive side this year that he can go make plays on offense and go snag the football and stay on his feet. He's a big run after catch guy. Same with Alex Phillips. He's a big guy in traffic. He can make catches in traffic and keep running. And then, you know, Jack Slater has been a big guy this year in certain games, just being able to get open when we need him to and coming down with the football. That's been huge.
That indeed. And you look at the course of the season, Rylee, your team's had multiple guys being heroes along the way. I go back to the start of the conference slate when you were playing at DeKalb, and we knew that was going to be a tough game coming in, knowing who they had with Coach Robertson as the head coach, and DeKalb was motivated to knock you guys off, and they almost did. They were about a few seconds away from something, and then you ran in the game-winning touchdown and a 2-point conversion late to seal, which ended up being huge because you ended up winning the NEA. And then I was there in Kinderville the next week against Leo, and I saw that first half was an incredible first half. I know they ended up being 56-40, but high scoring game. But it was a defense that stood out in the first half, really set the tone for that game, which is huge because when you look at the playoffs, it's a very difficult sectional, as you know. A lot of quality teams in that sectional. Obviously, you took care of New Haven the first round, but that Southside game was a trap game last week, and we know Southside has the athletes. You mentioned them on the 7-on-7 competition with Southside, and you know Southside, for the record, they threw some tricks up their sleeve in that game, and they nearly pulled up an upset. And we knew coming in Southside was going to play hard, and they showed that in Kinderville. And obviously, you had a big game, over 200 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, and to which prior to your 5th touchdown, Austin Phillips had a big carry to set up that game-winning score and whatnot. Can you take me through just the effort and the resilience to be able to pull away a win like this against a team like Southside with the Fort Wayne competition they bring?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I'm gonna be completely honest, I was the most nervous for Southside than any games I have been all season. And you're exactly right. That second week of sectionals, it's a trap game, and you got to be on your A game. You still got to play your hardest football, like it's a sectional championship. And kudos to Southside. They definitely, put it all out there. They have some amazing skill players. I know number 4, Irby, he had a tremendous game against us, made some incredible plays on offense. And I mean, that's what it comes down to, kind of what I touched on at the very beginning of this. We are a team. We don't have all those, big time athletes. We're not the fastest, to be honest, either. But just the way we're able to bind to one another and play, and in that game in particular, march down the field in the run game behind that senior offensive line, that was huge for us. And I'm pretty sure they still loaded up 8 guys in the box, and we were running it like, they only had 6, and it was man on man when it really wasn't. And I think that's a big thing for us. I told my guys as well that Southside is sleeper. They got some athletes. We don't really. I'd say we don't pair up very well against Southside because of their speed and just kind of how they play. But yeah, I mean, I had a great game. Definitely all kudos to the offensive line. I think, the game definitely would have went different if I wouldn't have had my fumbles in the first half. I think we would have scored on both of those drives and just kind of taken down Southside's morale and brought ours up. And that definitely kept them in the game. But at the end of the day, we pulled through, and that's what you got to do. In the playoffs, you gotta do what's working for you. And my coaches still trusted me to run the ball because it was working for us, and I ended up having those 5 touchdowns and 200 rushing yards. But just to be able to go out there and keep fighting, we got hit with some trick plays. That Irby, I mean, he had 2. I know he had 2 big pass receiving touchdowns in the first half. Those were big. Those are momentum for those guys, and that's what they need to stay in games. And we were just able to keep our calm, know that we had this. We were going to win this game, but we just had to keep doing our thing. And, that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, shout out to Southside, we mentioned, for a great effort last week against your team. And then obviously you had the 3 turnovers all in together, which definitely caused some issues for the team in general, but still pulled away the win nonetheless, which sets up the big matchup this week against Bishop Dwenger. They're only giving up 7 points per game on defense. We know Bishop Dwenger has the toughness that they bring. They got guys like Gus Tip and Houston Ellinger, Beckham Russell, Henry Jordan's their quarterback. Their defense is amazing, led by AJ Sheffery and Carter Zen's a great free safety for the Bishop Winter Saints. And then they got a really good kicker in Lucas Dwayne. So we know the special teams for Bishop Winter are excellent. And we know you know this, Rylee. Like Dwayne is known for their fundamentals, are known for being disciplined and structured defensively. So going into this game, you're going to have to play a much cleaner game this time around against Winter. You beat them last year in sectionals, but we know Dwayne is a difficult team. We know they're very difficult. They're going to be physical on Friday night. How do you continue to play at the level you're capable of and be able to have an opportunity to win at Bishop Winter? Because it's hard to come by. Being Dwayne on the road is hard to come by in these days.
Yeah, that was definitely the talk last year as well, and obviously this year's a new year. But I mean, we came out there last year firing at Shields Field, and I mean that was really all she wrote from the first snap. We were on them. We knew what it was going to take, and we brought that into the game. Had a huge win. Ended up actually finishing with the running clock, which in the sectional championship game against a Bishop Dwenger team like that, that's very unheard of. But this year is definitely a different year. As we know, they hang their hat on their defense, and they're going to do what they're due. They're not really going to switch things up. You know, they know where they like to be, and they're going to play in those positions and put the kids in the right positions to make plays as well. So we got to pick those things apart. You know, our defense has to step it up. Our defensive line has been great in the run, and we know they like to run the ball a lot. So I think as a DB and the rest of the DBs, we got to come out and make some plays. We got to have some pass breakups, possibly get an interception. You know, put pressure on Jordan, make him force some bad throws, and we can't let them get into field goal range because obviously Lucas, you know, he can kick them 50 yards, and as we've seen from prior games for them this season, they've won just off field goals. Their offense hasn't been able to score, but they've been able to get in enough field goal range to kick enough field goals, and then their defense has been able to clean up, shut out, and they've won from that aspect. So I think it's just picking them apart. You know, we got to find their holes, their weaknesses, and we definitely need some sparks. We need some momentum plays. You know, it's definitely going to be a grind out game. I think on both sides of the ball, both sides are going to have to grind out for their yards, but we definitely need some big plays that are going to, you know, get the momentum on our side, get us rolling, and just keep that tempo up. I think I saw that a little bit last year. They play who they play, and they're not really looking to sub too many kids out because those are their guys. So we really got to, you know, keep the tempo up, run our fast-paced offense, and just stay on their toes the entire night.
Yeah, Dwayner's had moments where they've been able to score a little bit against teams like Northrop, and then Leo, obviously in the first round sectionals, they won convincingly against Leo. But through and through, their defense is what makes Dwayner who they are. And then Lucas Dwayne, I think he hit the school record 53 yards earlier this year too. So you know the special teams and field position are going to be key here, and then special teams as well. But you know this, I mean, because you've been experiencing some big games in the playoffs, and I guess this sets up my last question here. You've been the starting quarterback for 2 years. You also play on defense. You're playing both ways and whatnot. Great run last year and whatnot. And there's a special vibe with East Snowball. They've been successful in football for so long, for 25 plus years since they won that state championship in 2000. When it comes to being an East Snowball Knights football player, now that you're a senior this year and whatnot, what does it mean to be an East Snowball Knight, and what is it like being a part of a community as passionate and proud as this East Snowball community is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the community. The community in Kendallville is unreal. I think it's the best football community, you know, in the 260 in most of Indiana. It's different. Friday nights in Kendallville are a different feeling. And to go along with that, our booster club is top notch. I again think that's one of the best booster clubs in the entire state. The way they're taking care of us, giving us team meals on Thursday nights. We also don't have school on Friday, so they're going to be providing a breakfast for us in the morning, and we're all going to come in and get a walkthrough and, you know, make sure we're all dialed in, get all the wrinkles out, any last things, you know, we want to talk about. But you know, I think just the coaches and the brotherhood and the standard is like the three main things I can on. The coaches, you know, this stretch football season, it's their life. You know, they're coming in and they're doing the most for us to put us in the right positions, to be able to make plays, to display defenses, display offenses, just put us in the right spots to go out there and win on Friday nights. And then mean, the brotherhood between all the players, we've seen it. I mean, me as a freshman, me as a sophomore, although those weren't some of the best years of East Noble that we've had in the past, just the brotherhood and the banking on one another and trusting your guy next to you, that's a huge thing. You know, it's an 11-man team when you're out there and your offense has to move with 11 guys. It's not going to move with just one guy. So just having that's been a huge thing for us. And Stewart has also been a great aspect. He's on us, and I think that's what's needed. Same thing with Amstutz, my first 2 years of high school. He's a coach that he's going to be on you, whether it's a down week against Belmont or it's one of the biggest games of the season against, what's right in front of us, Bishop Dwenger. It's got to be top notch, and there's a certain standard that you have to hold yourself to, and you got to be making sure that you're watching the film and you're taking care of your body, and when you're at practice that you're not messing around, you're doing the most you can to make sure you're in the right positions on Friday nights. And I think that's just one of the most important things about East Noble. It's also not just a 4-year program. The middle school coaches are great. The youth coaches are great. They're preparing our kids for what's ahead of them. And I mean, you go to a Friday night and every single kid's going to tell you that they can't wait to, get in that blue and gold and play under the lights at East Noble. So just having that and the community rallying behind us, we'll go to away games and it feels like a home game with how many fans we have. So all those things combined together, that's what gives you a great program that, is dominant year after year after year. And like you said, making it to state, it's a great feeling, but there's a lot that goes into it. There was a lot that went into it last year. There's been a lot that's been going into this year to try to repeat the same thing. And the most important thing our coaches, rep to us by saying is we're going 1-0. We want to go 1-0 today, 1-0 on Tuesday, 1-0 on Wednesday, 1-0 on Thursday, and then that's going to allow us to be 1-0 on Friday. And then on Saturday, that's when you reset, digest, and then it's back to being 1-0. So just all that combined, that's what makes a winning program. That's what, wants kids to come out and play football and know that they're going to be successful. They got coaches that love them. They got teammates that love them. And you're going to go out there on Friday nights and you're going to win football games. I mean, there's not much better than that.
Yeah, just wanted to just add a little bit to that before we wrap things up here. I think that structure that the school has with football is so important because a lot of times with football, everything has to go right with this for for a program to be successful. And when you have a school like East Noble with the community support it has the resources it has, and then you have the coaching structure and whatnot all across the board, and having that sense of consistency before you get to high school is so important. I think there's only a few schools that can really do that one. And it helps that Luke Amstutz is still around right in your corner, giving out his advice there when he needs to. So that sense of support there and the alumni there, just such a huge, huge part of what makes East Noble such a special community. And with me being there earlier this year, I can tell that this was something different than any other place out there, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Rylee, any final thoughts before we let you go?
I do not. I'm excited for Friday. It's going to be a great game. Excited to be back at Shields Field for another sectional championship. And, the Knights are ready to come out on top and go on to regionals. It's trophy season now, so nothing gets better.
That is for sure. It's one win, you get the trophy, and survive and advance from there. Rylee, thank you for the time and great interview as always. And good luck to you and your team on Friday when you travel to take on the Bishop Dwenger Saints.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sam. Have a good night.